I have the unenviable task of telling you about everything that's happening in IoT in 12 minutes and 47 seconds, so we better get moving along fairly quickly. I won't even talk to that. I will start on this. Okay, so when thinking about what's interesting now and kind of what we're going on to in the future, I think it's maybe useful to take a little look back into the past. What does the last decade of IoT look like? We as analysts have been watching this space for about the last 15 years, back to before it was IoT, it was machine-to-machine and telematics, and we've been closely monitoring it. So what's happened? Normally, as an analyst, I get up here and show you some interesting market forecast charts and lovely death by PowerPoint. Today, I have 3 slides, and I'm not going to show you any charts of market growth, but the last decade saw something like a 10x growth in IoT connections. Think about that. When people are telling you that the shine has come off IoT, well, you can point to pretty much every car rolling off the production line with connectivity in it. Smart meter deployments getting up into the very high percentage of meters. All of these critical use cases that are increasingly being used. And we are seeing increasing criticality. We do a load of survey work, and we ask enterprises about how are you deploying IoT? What are you using it for? And what we're seeing is it's being used for more and more critical applications. With that increasing criticality, you get an increasing security threat. So we're seeing increasing growth in security. I'm moving quite briskly, you will note. So we've seen that kind of a dynamic. We also see that it's moved from being something like the Wild West in terms of, well, things like permanent roaming. Okay, maybe you kind of risked permanent roaming back in the day, and now you can't, and we've seen that kind of gradual evolution to a more mature space, which you're inevitably going to get if you're going to grow 10x. We've also seen some wonderful transitions in terms of what I refer to as make-do to made-to-measure in terms of the technology stack, okay, across platforms, across devices, across operating systems, across protocols, across network technologies. People have talked about MBIoT and LTE-M and RedCap and so on in this session. You know, these are made-to-measure technologies specifically designed for IoT. The previous panel talking about the remote SIM provisioning capabilities, probably, certainly, large elements of that would not have come along if the IoT growth had not come through. I'll give you my views on that in a little bit. We've seen also a move to a kind of a platformization of the approach of the market. Now, the arrival of the, in inverted commas, IoT platforms has been a great thing. It has helped to streamline the process of building and deploying IoT solutions across connectivity management platforms, device management, application enablement, and so on. But there has been a tendency to sort of see platforms as a solution to the problem to all of the IoT world's problems. And if we've seen anything in the last few years, it's kind of a deplatformization, a recognition that maybe the answer to every enterprise's problems is not throw another piece of software at them in the form of another platform. It's actually much more holding their hand as they go through the process of deploying the solution. And the answer to IoT is not a single, universally, infinitely scalable platform. And we've also seen, over that period, a shift from specialists to generalists and back to specialists again. A lot across a range of the areas, because those specialists tend to be focused on what are the needs of my set of customers, my community, rather than how can I try and meet the demands of all of IoT. And all of IoT's requirements are different. There is, in effect, no such thing as IoT. There are hundreds and hundreds of use cases deployed by dozens, well, millions of companies around the world in a very wide variety of different scenarios, and none of them really think of what they're doing, other than maybe sort of tangentially, as being the Internet of Things. They're thinking about we're deploying fleet management, or something to do with our supply chain, or something to do with our remote monitoring of assets. So we've seen that as a result, that maybe the specialists kind of understand that space and can treat better, can kind of contextualize a set of technologies which exist under this IoT umbrella into the vertical in which that customer sits. Current IoT landscape, there's quite a lot of stuff on here, so I might be a little bit selective about what I talk through. But we think about the starting bottom left, user demand. How is the user demand evolving, or how does it sit today? And there's a few interesting things that we get through from some of the survey work that we do. Number one requirement for an IoT buyer is reputation and brand in terms of the vendors that they want to work with. And that points to the fact that, well, I'm increasingly using this for critical use cases. I am probably going to have a relationship with this customer for 10 plus years. So they are making very careful consideration of issues of counterparty risk. Am I trusting this to a company that is going to be around for the foreseeable future? Then you've got other considerations, the typical considerations of security and coverage and transparency and so on. And I've mentioned the increasing criticality of use cases. But what still comes through is there is not necessarily a great deal of knowledge or understanding about what all the technologies are. Many of the things that we talk about in this room, I think somebody on the panel said it, the customer doesn't understand, and the customer doesn't need to understand, which is correct. So the big role is taking away some of the complexity of that technology landscape, which is getting increasingly crowded. And in fact, I've got that top right, but I'll talk about technology in my next slide. The economics are looking interesting in terms of, well, how do the market dynamics work? You've got a lot of, I won't say commoditization, but certainly some a high degree of competition and price erosion in a lot of the elements of IoT that we look at. And so the focus of pretty much every company is on finding more efficient ways to serve, and particularly more efficient ways to serve the low end of the market. And by low end, I mean those applications that are at the sort of sensing end of the spectrum, rather than we kind of think of a bifurcation of the space. There's kind of sensing, which is the low end of the market, and there is a sort of data stream market, connected cars and CCTV and all that kind of stuff. But this area is growing, enabled particularly by a set of new low power technologies, essentially, which help to drive that space. But that obviously creates some price erosion just because of the blend of different devices within the base. And that focuses everybody's attention on, okay, well, how do I ensure that I can serve those customers in a cost-effective way across all manner of things, platforms, across networks, across just internal operational processes. So there is a very deep focus on how to do that correctly. There's also a big focus on, okay, can I just sell my way out of this space? Finding more refined and sophisticated, maybe the word, but certainly more diverse approach to a channel strategy, finding new mechanisms for getting into markets, whether that's managed service providers or systems integrators or master resellers or distributors or a whole range of different possible routes to market. And a lot of the conversations we have with our customers is just how do we find those routes out to the market. Regulation. Regulation is probably my number one thing to watch out for in 2024. There are just so many moving parts to the regulations that are impacting on IoT at the moment that it will have to be a focus of attention of just about everybody in this room and just about everybody who's involved in IoT. Now, we have always had some form of regulatory issues related to IoT, if it's just spectrum licensing, but permanent roaming, that's always been an issue. But increasingly, we're seeing a polarization of the global market, kind of manifestation of that move from the Wild West into something that's rather more nuanced. But you've got a polarization around the US versus the EU versus China. And it's not to say that those are challenges that can't be overcome, but there is an increasing requirement for a kind of a some regulatory compliance as a service to ensure that the architecting of the application is done in the right way, to ensure that you're compliant with both the the US Cloud Act and all of the EU regulations relating to data. So there is an inherent conflict between those, and that's just one item in microcosm. Technology I'll talk to in my next slide. So if I've talked about the past first, then I got on to a little bit about the present state of the market. This last one is about the future, but it's really easy as analysts to kind of think about the future in terms of, okay, well, where's the market going to be in 10 years? But actually the interesting thing is, where's the market going to be this year, next year, maybe into 2026? What's happening now that's really, really critical? And every year I say every year, this is the second time we've done it, but you know, two data points is a trend, right? So every year we do we come up with a set of transition topics, things that we think are changing and evolving that are worthwhile looking at and understanding, that are in a period of transition from maybe a relatively steady state 5 years ago to what's likely to be a relatively steady state in another 5 years. And this is the dozen topics that we've come up with. IoT and data regulations I already mentioned. What I'm going to focus on for my last 2 minutes are those towards the bottom, which are around the aspects of IoT which are particularly relevant for Mobile World Congress, because they are those that are related to telecoms and networks. So you have eSIM. I probably don't need to repeat everything there is to say about SGP32, because we just had a panel about it, and I couldn't have put it better than Paul's third time lucky. I will completely agree with that. But the interesting thing for me is, okay, the technology looks absolutely great, but what do the business models look like? How do the commercial models work for that space? And I've been telling people that I was sat on a train from Paris down to Barcelona on Saturday with a piece of paper in front of me trying to work out, okay, well, if this company does that, then these guys do that, and trying to work through what the commercial models are likely to look like in two to 3 years. And it's still not clear to me, but I'll work it out at some point. So that's looking fantastically interesting. 5G opportunities. Well, this is a 5G summit, right? And there's been a tendency to look at 5G as being somewhat hyped, but I kind of feel like now and the next couple of years are the years where you start to get to the point with the standalone networks deployed and being able to deliver the quality of service and the low latency and so on, that actually it does start to come into its own, and it is something different from other technologies in terms of having that programmability within the network and being able to do some far more interesting stuff. So I think we are actually now ripe for a 5G evolution. Non-terrestrial networks is very interesting as well. This idea of taking, there was a panel earlier on, hybrid cellular and IoT connectivity, and that redundancy as a kind of a fallback for cellular connectivity, we think looks tremendously interesting for the next year or two, and will start to emerge. And the final one, cellular LPWA. I keep having conversations with people about how they're finding challenges with LTE-M and NB-IoT roaming, and there is a lot of work ongoing with that. And so we kind of feel like that in the next year or two, in terms of that international aspect to making use of LTE-M and NB-IoT, will start to again come into its own. And my time is up. Thank you all for your attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of Mobile World Congress.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Well, that brings the end to our summit, and I'd like to thank all of our speakers and panelists. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Keegan, G&D, Thales, and Wiliot. And of course, I'd like to thank all of you for attending. I hope you got something from this, and I look forward to seeing you at our next 5G IoT Summit later this year. Thank you.